I want to show you here. This is the crypto market, and it's down a lot. I mean, it's been bad the last few days. Well, and I'm also going to tell you what my top 4 picks for 2019 are, and in terms of, and I'll tell you why. The first thing is, if you look at this is coinpaprika.com. This is the last quarter, and I just wanted to show you the performance. So now, my 4 picks for this market, and not these first 2 I'm picking because of the adoption that I've been reading about for the last year and a half. Bitcoin and Ethereum are obviously the chosen ones by Wall Street to begin with. And when I give you these first 2, Bitcoin and Ethereum, I pick those only because of what I know is the adoption. And when I say adoption, I mean Wall Street is going to have those. They're going to be the first ones through the door that they allow their investors to invest in. That means those will be the first 2 that are in mutual funds and ETFs and everything else that's coming. For that reason, those 2 are 2 out of the 4. The other 2 are for the same reason, the investing reasons I just told you, plus many other reasons. XRP, you already know everything. I've told you everything about XRP. But what I want you to look at right now, besides all the hundreds of reasons that I've told you, XRP is the one. It is the digital asset. It's the greatest digital asset ever created. Well, besides those reasons, I don't believe this is a coincidence. Look at the 1 quarter returns. XRP has the worst 1 quarter return of all these top 10 digital assets. The only exception.
This has been the narrative for a few years because I've talked to your CEO, Brad, fairly often, and he's made the case this is a way for banks to save money, use XRP as kind of a bridge currency. But I got to say, it doesn't seem to be happening. It seems every year this is kind of the promise, but we're not seeing a lot of adoption. What's going on there?
I would agree that adoption of digital assets has been a little slower, or I mean, you could see it as being incredibly quick or incredibly slow, depending on what time frame you think is reasonable. I would say revolutionizing international finance is not something that you would expect to happen overnight. But it is a multi-step process, and I think the first problem that we encountered, I mean, we kind of thought that we could take a direct line to settling with a digital asset, and I think a lot of people thought that, well, now we have digital assets, let's just use them for payments, and that'll be that. Part of the problem is that the payment systems are just not capable of supporting instantaneous settlement. So if you think about a payment system like SWIFT, where you just kind of push a payment message out, and you don't necessarily know the entire path, and you don't know the fees until later, you don't even know if the destination account even exists until sometime later when the payment is actually processed by the destination institution. There's no way that you could build instantaneous settlement into a system like that. So we kind of found ourselves in this situation where if we wanted institutions to settle their international payments with a digital asset, we first had to rebuild the payment messaging, sort of the plumbing. And we discovered something interesting on the way. What we discovered was that the existing plumbing was so bad, I mean, it dates back to batch computing days, that just improving that messaging was a product. That was something that banks and non-bank financial institutions would be interested in. And so we focused on building a top-notch payment network that can settle with a digital asset. And I think it's fair to say that we haven't yet proven that we can actually settle with a digital asset. We're just making that transition from building a payment network that can settle with a digital asset to figuring out where you really want to settle with a digital asset and making that settlement happen.
That's, if I can interrupt a second, that's my understanding. You built xCurrent, right, as a messaging product?
Correct.
And a lot of people seem to think it's superior to Swift. And you almost have this successful enterprise software business on your hands. And good for you, but it seems Ripple wants to do something more, which is to encourage the users of this to also wrap some XRPs into the transactions. But it sort of seems like you're shoehorning something in there that a lot of banks are like, wait a minute, we don't need this. We're just good with the messaging thing. So make the case for us why you need XRP in this.
I would just start out by saying I think that is a fair point. I think we do have a struggle on our hands to convince particularly banks, because banks are extremely conservative, they're very slow moving. What we've discovered is that non-bank financial institutions, payment companies are much, much more aggressive, and they're much more interested in things that can save them time and money and cost. And so we built the XRapid product as a way to kind of solve that problem. And it was adapted to the real life situation that we were facing. We kind of had this idea that institutions would hold XRP or a digital asset, they'd make their payments with a digital asset, or regional hubs would settle with a digital asset. And for a variety of reasons, the world wasn't quite ready for that, including regulatory issues, lack of liquidity, immature ecosystem around digital assets. And so we couldn't aim directly for sort of the end state that we wanted. We had to come up with a more practical plan. XRapid is aimed at two things. So one of them is sort of remittance type international flows, where cost is very high, and the volatility actually favors a digital asset, which is kind of bizarre. Usually people will say the problem with digital assets is they have such volatility. But here, if you think about trying to pre-fund Mexican pesos on a Thursday to make payments on a Monday, that's a lot of volatility in Mexican pesos. Whereas if you can use XRP, which can move across the planet in just a couple of seconds, the volatility is actually less. Even though XRP is inherently more volatile, you're only holding it for the minute or two it takes to complete the transaction. And I think the other thing that XRapid handles is you might have a bank that doesn't want to touch a digital asset. They're like, we can't have XRP on our books, we can't buy it, we can't sell it, it's just too much of a regulatory challenge for us. But let's say they want to make a payment in Mexico, and they don't want to have to pre-fund, and they don't want to have to get confirmation 3 days later. What they can do is they can have an XRapid customer that probably won't be a bank. It'll be a payment company or some other type of institution that uses a digital asset to buy the Mexican pesos as an internal treasury function and then offers those Mexican pesos to the bank. So it's a workaround to the limitations that we found that we think is adapted to the situation that we're in today.
Let's switch to stablecoins. Last week, a new kind of consortium of banks said, hey, we're rolling out this new stablecoin. Does that kind of freeze you guys out? Or what do you think of Facebook's coin? So I'll ask you quickly, too, about the price of XRP. Sort of surprised. It used to be very volatile. It used to, go from 1 cent to $4 and everywhere. But last year, it seems to have really stabilized. What's behind that? Is there sort of some hidden hand keeping that price in a narrow band?